With you again. It's been a minute since we've done one of these live streams, and we are going to be doing a recap of all of the new rules and new updates that have come out of the finance department just today with the fall economic update, the fall economic statement. This is something that we talked a little bit about yesterday, but we didn't know all the specifics. But Chrystia Freeland gave this address a little bit earlier today, just a couple of hours ago. I've waited a little bit to bring it to you because we want to be able to sort of skip the French parts. I want to be respectful of your time here. For those that are English speaking, such as myself. If you are tuning in, let me know that you're here. Comment. You'll see your comment come up here on the screen for these live streams. And let me know where you're tuning in from. A lot of different times when we've been able to get everyone from, or at least one person from every different province. I've seen Enid here and Nileo, Aaron, and VZF baby. Yeah, good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. All right, so we're gonna get into this. Freeland gave this update, and we're going to watch it. We're going to sort of go through it. I haven't done a live in a while. Yeah, you're right, Alka. So it's good to be here. It's good to be with you all, and this is where we get to actually sort of hang out as a big group, which is nice. So the other nice thing about doing this a little bit delayed, which is different from what we've done in the past, is that we actually have the document. We have the fall economic statement, so we're going to listen to some of the different sort of framings here, some of the response, I think likely rather angry response from some of the other politicians, some of the opposition leaders, Polyev, Jagmeet Singh, these types of things. But the nice thing is we can actually go in and find the specifics. Lots of stuff on housing here, interesting stuff on mortgages and sort of mortgage relief for some people, which is controversial for sure. Changes to short-term rentals. There could be different taxes, different benefits, and information about what the deficit's going to look like, higher, lower. But let's get into it. Yeah, I agree. I see even more people tuning in. Surrey, we've got Quebec and Windsor, Aurelia, love to see it, London, Ontario, Halifax, Estero, very cool. All right, let's get into this. Like I said, we're going to skip over some of the parts that are a little either dry or in a different language, but let's dive right into it, folks.
Finance to make a statement. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honor to table, in both official languages, the 2023 Fall Economic Statement.
I think she was expecting some applause there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
All right.
Is it too late for a coffee? I think no. Especially if we're going to be listening to all this.
Mr. Speaker, our government
maybe
was
a beer
elected
later, Brian.
on a promise to deliver for the middle class. And our economic plan is focused on building an economy that works for everyone, with good jobs that people can count on. Les grandes
major investments.
Oh, okay. We got a translation this time.
Transit, in EV battery factories, and in new energy projects are not just red ink in our fiscal statement. They are truly investments, decade-long investments in the economic growth, which creates middle-class jobs, which raises incomes and makes middle-class communities more prosperous.
Continental Railway a century ago. These are foundational investments which only government can make. We believe in Canada, and we believe in the incredible possibility of Canada's future. And that is why we are making the investments that Canada needs to make that bright future a reality.
Bravo.
Affordable early learning and childcare is likewise an investment in our social infrastructure, and it is also transformative economic policy. It gives children the best possible start in life and saves middle-class families thousands of dollars a year. while also supporting record women's employment and thus helping to address the labor shortages which contributed to inflation.
There's something I want to comment on there just a little bit. I find it so frustrating when politicians look only at the big headline numbers and don't look more closely into it, saying, look at how many more people we can have in the workforce. Look how much more GDP we can create from it, without really thinking about, okay, what does that look like on a GDP per capita basis? Does that actually mean Canadians are better off, or does it just make the government look better? This is what I'm thinking.
When I announced our plan to build a Canada-wide system of affordable early learning and childcare, some people were skeptical, and justifiably so. After all, it was a promise that had been made and broken for 5 decades. But today, just 2.5 years after we launched our plan, it is working. Childcare fees are down by at least 50% across Canada. In 6 provinces and territories, we've already brought childcare costs down to just $10 a day. And we are on track to deliver outstanding, nurturing care for $10 a day everywhere in Canada by 2026.
And it is women in Quebec who led the way in terms of affordable childcare. Therefore, our plan supports the creation of 30,000 new spots to make childcare services more accessible across the province.
Enhancements to Canada's social safety net, ranging from the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, the Canada Pension Plan, are about driving down inequality, raising incomes, and ensuring by design, not by trickle down, that everyone can truly share in our country's prosperity. With investments in our economy, our communities, and a new generation of middle-class careers, we have focused relentlessly on ensuring that government investments deliver real economic opportunities for all Canadians. And that, Mr. Speaker, is our economic plan. Pensons seulement à tout le chemin.
Just think of how far we've come, Mr. Speaker. Right after a decade of conservative austerity, our government has lifted nearly 2.3 million Canadians out of poverty. Inflation is coming down, and wages are going up. And private sector economists now expect Canada to avoid the post-pandemic recession that many had predicted.
That's an interesting thing to keep in mind here, because all of the assumptions when we get into the numbers on debt costs and interest rate costs are all under the assumption that there will not be a recession, that the Bank of Canada will have successfully threaded the needle between not killing the economy and going into a recession through their interest rate hikes, and not raising too little to have inflation come back. That's what the assumption is in a lot of these numbers as I've taken a preview at them.
To our economic plan, Canada is today a global investment destination of choice. In the In the first half of this year, Canada received the 3rd most foreign direct investment of any country in the entire world. And that was more investment per capita than any of our G7 allies. More investment than the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, France, or Japan.
Per capita.
And the
Now
IMF
she looks at per
projects
capita
Canada
when
to
it suits.
likewise see the strongest economic growth in the G7 next year.
Wow.
What does all of this mean for people, Mr. Speaker? What this means is that our economy is creating great jobs for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And compared to before the pandemic, I am so glad to be able to say that over 1 million more Canadians are employed today. We all have more work to do, Mr. Speaker, but our economic plan is working. Ceci étant dit,
Now, I don't want to deny the difficult reality that many Canadians are facing today. I absolutely understand that after 3 difficult years, after a global pandemic, global inflation, and global interest rate hikes, Canadians are worn out, frustrated, and feeling the squeeze. What Canadians deserve today is for us to address the very real pain that so many are feeling. With a hopeful and achievable vision for our country's future. That is my priority. That is our government's priority. And that is the priority of this fall economic statement.
the foundation of our fall economic statement is our responsible fiscal plan. In the face of global inflation, our government has reduced the deficit faster than any other country in the G7. And, and with inflation down from 8.1% last year to just 3.1%
Wow, that's
today.
something. That's something.
We are taking care not to feed inflation by carefully targeting new investments towards the priorities of Canadians today and towards the future growth that makes our finances sustainable. Canada maintains both the lowest deficit and the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the G7. And with a new reduction in public service spending, this fall economic statement builds on the $15 billion in refocus spending that I announced in the spring.
I've got to bring something up and let you know what's on my mind here as we're listening to this is when they talk about we've got the best GDP growth, the best economic growth in all of the G7, all of these comparative advanced economies. What you also don't take into consideration is how we've gotten that higher GDP growth in these other countries. I think it's largely through human stimulus. This is what we call it on the channel. The increase in economic activity that you get when when you increase the population of a country, right? We don't get that growth through growing our productivity, which is the traditional way that you would encourage growth in an economy, more Canadians making more money by being more productive, more efficient, and innovating, right? Instead, we're sort of hooked on this human stimulus of bringing in more people to consume more, to create more, and as a result, pump up our GDP numbers and make the government look good. When you look at the GDP numbers per person, you see a vastly different story.
We are ensuring that Canada's finances remain sustainable because that's how we'll be able to continue investing in Canadians for years to come. Fondé sur notre...
Built upon our responsible fiscal plan, our fall economic statement has two objectives. The first is to continue supporting the middle class at a time when some prices are still high, and for many, mortgage renewals are looming. This is why we are making sizable changes, generational changes to competition law in Canada. This historic step includes cracking down on predatory pricing and other tactics that big corporations use to raise costs for Canadians. Talking about competition law may sound esoteric, but it's not. This is new, significant, concrete action that will help to stabilize prices and provide more choices for Canadians. We are cracking down on the junk fees that Canadians are saddled with every day. Every day. And an investigation will soon be launched into international roaming charges that drive up Canadians' phone bills. We are lifting the GST and HST.
Because it's international roaming charges that drive up our phone bills, not the oligarchy of only a few companies that actually have infrastructure and that get government subsidies. Bell and Rogers.
On counseling and psychotherapy services so that Canadians can receive the support they need. We are extending employment insurance to parents who adopt. And we are introducing a new leave for federally regulated workers who are grieving from miscarriages. Because every family, no matter how it comes together, needs time to bond. And every woman should have time to heal from the painful loss of a pregnancy.
Canadians who are struggling with their mortgage payments at a time of higher interest rates. Today, I am announcing the new Canadian Mortgage Charter. The Canadian Mortgage Charter details the tailored mortgage relief that Canadians need and can expect from their banks if they are in financial difficulty.
We'll talk more about it, but there's questions sort of that have been risen about, okay, if you sort of help people who are struggling with their mortgages, who are in the middle class, well, it's kind of like bailing out homeowners and stopping them from feeling the pain that the Bank of Canada is trying to get them to feel to quell inflation, reduce demand, make people feel poorer so that they don't spend as much money.
Our goal is to help Canadians through an incredibly challenging time by making sure Canadians have the support they need to afford their mortgages and keep their homes when renewing at a time of higher interest rates. And we're committed to taking further action if necessary. Our second objective is equally urgent. For generations, Canada has been a country where if you worked hard, if you went to school, found a good job, and squirreled some money away, there would be a home that you could afford. For generations, that promise was kept. But today, for a generation that ranges from new high school graduates to couples in their 30s making six-figure salaries, that is a promise which is under threat. Keeping that promise demands a great national effort, and that is an effort that our government is stepping up to lead. Building on the significant action we have already taken, including this fall alone, I am today announcing new measures through our economic plan to build thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new homes across the country and to build them faster. We are unlocking billions of dollars in new financing, money that will go towards supporting the construction of new homes for Canadians. We are supporting nonprofit, co-op, and public housing providers. We will be helping to cut the red tape that prevents construction workers from moving across the country to build homes, and we will be bringing more of the skilled trades workers that our construction sector needs to Canada. We'll be cracking down on short-term rentals listed on sites like Airbnb and Vrbo, which are keeping far too many homes off the market in communities and cities right across the country. That's going to make a real difference to communities. And Mr. Speaker, that is just what we are doing today. We are also making it easier for more than 250,000 Canadians and counting to buy their first home with the new tax-free First Home Savings Account. The federal government owns more land than anyone else in Canada, and we're going to build more homes on it. We're lifting the GST on new rental construction to make it more affordable for builders to build so that they can build more homes faster. We're repairing and building hundreds of thousands of new homes, and we are financing the construction of tens of thousands more. We have banned foreign investment in Canadian housing, and we're ensuring that property flippers pay their fair share. We're making it more affordable for families to construct secondary suites. And we have signed agreements with cities across the country to slash the red tape, which is preventing homes from being built in the first place. And in exchange, we're providing them with new funding to build more than 100,000 new homes faster.
Wow, interesting stuff. It's really interesting to watch how different political parties sort of incorporate the messages that have been working with other political parties to sort of soften the narratives against them, right? A lot of this, it's the fault of red tape in municipalities that for housing. It sounds familiar to other parties' sort of statements that they've made.
Because our country needs more homes, and we need more of them. Fast. Nous devons construire.
We must build homes in our biggest cities and our smallest towns. We must build detached family homes and secondary suites. We must build co-op housing and rental apartments. And it will take all of us, the federal government and the provinces, cities and towns, the private sector and not-for-profits, right across this great country. That's what our government is doing, and we are approaching this task with the purpose, drive, and intensity it deserves. We will keep working day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year to build the homes that Canadians need and expect and deserve. At the heart of the promise of Canada is the conviction that every day should represent a new opportunity for all Canadians. No matter who you are, no matter what you look like, or who you love, or where you were born. Also, if you work hard, you can share in the remarkable possibilities of our wonderful country. This includes a good career that pays you well and a home you can afford.
Building a Canada that delivers on the promise of the greatest country in the world.
Yeah, happy-go-lucky in the chat. Interesting. We heard a comment there on making it more affordable for families to do conversions of single-family homes to duplexes for individual families. That'll be interesting to look at.
Government's work for these next 2 years and beyond. Canada is not and never has been broken.
Here's the quote from the title going against Poilievre's
We are the imperfect
statements.
and remarkable creation of generations of Canadians who did their part to build a better country in good times and in tough times, calloused hand by calloused hand. Generations of Canadians who fought fear and cynicism with hope and hard work. Generations of Canadians who fought day after day to keep Canada moving forward. And generations of Canadians who believed, just as I do today, that in our magnificent country, better is always possible.
Okay, so, wow. That's the statement. I guess we're going to get some comments here from the other political parties. If you're just tuning in, we're going to be going into more depth on all of this. We've got the actual update here with the actual text. We'll go through all of the table of contents here, which is going to give us a better idea of what's actually inside this thing, and we'll get into more detail. Let's listen into Pierre now.
$1 billion of costly new spending. This update can
Question, come on.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
with this $20 billion of costly new spending, this update can be summed up very simply. Prices up, rent up, debt up, taxes up, time's up. Common sense conservatives will vote non-confidence on this disgusting scam.
That's interesting to hear, saying the Conservatives will vote non-confidence. That's sort of a little bit of a barb, knowing that won't actually go through. A vote of non-confidence is when the opposition parties vote against the government that's in power, triggering an election if there's a vote of no confidence and it passes. This is something that hasn't happened, and it's kind of like it's a default majority for the Liberals right now because of the supply and confidence agreement that the NDP signed with the Liberal government maybe about a year and a half ago now. That they said, we signed this to make sure the Liberals stay in power, but also say they're going to do things for us. That's some dental care help for children, which has already started to roll out, along with some other demands, one of which is pharmacare, national pharmacare. That's something that the Liberals haven't put forward and likely aren't putting forward, given the increased debt costs and the cost of implementing that. It would be rather challenging to push that right now. But despite the fact that they've sort of backed or changed their mind on part of the deal with the NDP, I think it's going to be rather interesting. I don't think the NDP are going to vote for the Liberals to hit an election with a vote of no confidence, because they're not in the best electoral position right now either. And some people might see that vote as saying, hey, Conservatives, you're up in the polls, you take the government, or you take the reins now, which is something that the NDP would definitely be against happening, given some of their policies and just the sort of the comments from Jagmeet Singh.
After 8 years of this prime minister, he is not worth the cost, and today he's adding another $20 billion to inflation, which will put pressure on interest rates. In addition, today he proposes to increase taxes on the backs of middle-class people. So that is why the Conservatives, guided by common sense, will vote against and non-confidence in this government.
You know, a year ago, this finance minister told the House she'd have the budget balanced by the year 2028. In that time, she has announced $100 billion of additional debt above and beyond having doubled that debt in the first place. This debt is already being paid by Canadians with the worst inflation in 40 years, with interest rates that risk a mortgage meltdown on the $900 billion of mortgages that will renew over the next 3 years. That's 2/3 of mortgages, with the IMF saying that of all 40 OECD countries, Canada is the most at risk of a mortgage crisis. And now, her solution, another $20 billion of inflationary spending. This after the Governor of the Bank of Canada has said the deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to mortgage rates on the backs of Canadians. And finally, today they go ahead with a plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple.
Point of order. For the member from Elmwood Transcona, if can just give me a minute, if I could just consult with the table for an instant.
I'm muted. So, yeah, this is interesting.
The honourable member from Elmwood Transcona on a point of order.
They're going to Daniel
Thank you very much,
Blakey,
Mr.
NDP.
Speaker. I may have been under a mistaken impression. I thought we were in the question and comment period, but perhaps we're into speeches. I just wonder if you could provide some guidance to the Leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you.
I thank the honourable. I do thank the honourable member from Elmwood Transcona. We are in a period of question and comments. There are 10 minutes for questions and comments. I am hoping that the honourable leader of the opposition will come to his question so that we'll have an equal amount of time for the Minister of Finance to respond, and as well as I know that there are other finance critics from each of the parties who would also like to ask questions and comments. The honourable leader of the opposition, I hope, can come soon to his question.
We can always count on the NDP to betray their constituents and come to the rescue of the tax and spending. And so my question, not just on behalf of the common sense Conservatives, but on behalf of the countless people who are losing their homes, who are lined up at food banks, who are living through the worst economy since the Great Depression, is exactly how much will it cost the average family when this government goes ahead with its plan to quadruple the carbon tax? How much?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let's start by setting the record straight. Canada has the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7, and we've had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation. And you don't need to ask me, Mr. Speaker, about our fiscally responsible track record. Talk to the ratings agencies, because they have reaffirmed our AAA rating. But, Mr. Speaker, the question that we all need to be asking the Conservatives is, why are they so passionately opposed to the investments that Canadians need? Why are they opposed to early learning and childcare, which is working, which is making life more affordable for Canadians and is expanding our labor force at a time when we desperately need it? Why are they so opposed to building more homes faster for Canadians? Why have they said it is, quote unquote, disgusting to be investing in building more rental homes? Is it disgusting for us to be cracking down on Airbnb?
Goodness.
And why are they so
Both
opposed
parties.
to our essential investments in the industrial transformation that Canada needs?
Maybe it's just because they know Canadians who don't have as much context are going to be listening in on these things, but it's just so incredibly frustrating that nobody can actually ask a straight question or answer a straight question and actually get some valuable information for people. All of the questions and all of the answers are just, what narrative do we want to push as a political party? What do we want the people that are only going to get 10-second little clips of this to think when they don't have a broader context? Both Poilievre and Freeland here, it's frustrating.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Among the measures called for by the Bloc Québécois that the Bloc wanted to see in this fall economic statement, there was one element that it was urgency. We called for monies for seniors who are suffering because of the rise in the cost of living. We asked for a one-year reprieve for the small businesses that are asking for an extra year to repay. And we asked for money for businesses and seniors, but also for people who are homeless. We asked for an emergency fund for people who are about to spend the winter on the street. So my question for the Minister of Finance is, what is her definition of the word urgent? Because it's not the same as ours. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you what I find urgent. I find building housing in Quebec and all over Canada to be urgent. And that is why in this fall economic statement, we are investing $16 billion in building housing. That is urgent, and that is why we are doing it now. We also find it urgent, Mr. Speaker, to have an economic plan for jobs today and tomorrow. And that is why we are investing in the green transition. We've made the biggest investment in Quebec's history, and I know that now Premier Legault was very proud to be a partner with us. We are investing for the needs of today and the jobs of today and tomorrow.
The Honourable Member from Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the Minister mentioned in her remarks that we're facing a housing crisis, certainly a significant housing shortage. She talked about how Canada has the lowest debt in the G7. She talked about how it has the lowest deficit in the G7. The government of the Bank of Canada said that spending on housing wouldn't be inflationary. Now, she announced some measures today for social housing, but they don't start until 2025, 2026.
Trigger the Conservative.
The Honourable Member rising on a point of order.
My point of order, Mr. Speaker, is that there isn't a question in this long, rambling, pointless speech.
Come on.
Order. I'd like to remind all members that this is a question and comments. The Honourable Member from Elmwood-Transcona still has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am tempted to start from the top, but I won't, because I do want to get to the point, which is that for a government that's saying they're in a good fiscal position, and with a Bank of Canada that says spending on housing is not inflationary, the question is, why are the new investments for social housing put off to 2025?
Good question. Yeah, that is a good question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the member for Elmwood-Transcona for his commitment to Canadians for his hard work on housing. Mr. Speaker, we absolutely understand the urgency of investing in housing. We need to invest in housing today, and we need to have a plan to continue investing in housing going forward. I am very pleased that our investments in housing right now include supporting the development of co-op housing, of lifting the GST from new co-op developments, along with providing new funding to get them built. As someone who has lived in a co-op, I can tell you, this is one of the best forms of affordable housing that creates great community at the same time.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre on a brief question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that the finance minister recognizes we are in a climate crisis. At the same time, she needs to know that oil and gas companies are gouging Canadians at the pumps. 47 cents of every dollar of inflation is from corporate profits. Why would they not apply the Canada Recovery Dividend, which they already did, to banks and life insurance, to big oil in the fall economic statement?
And a brief answer from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
We absolutely understand the urgency of climate action. That is why I'm delighted that today we are publishing a timeline for our investment tax credits that are so essential to Canada's green transition and to our economic plan that is creating jobs today and jobs tomorrow.
Brief question.
Like, I get the whole green transition thing. I just don't understand why so much of the economic policy is focused on one individual sector, one part of the economy. It's like thinking that like everything, like every single sector needs to be green, and that's the only place that we should be focusing our policy to build investment and putting our tax dollars into. Like are there not other sectors that might contribute more to productivity, contribute more to the average Canadian's wealth via GDP per capita, right? Like I just question these types of things.
From the member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in the past number of budgets, we have seen the federal government commit significant funding to support the people of Ukraine in their fight against Russia's genocidal invasion. And so my question to the Minister of Finance is, we just saw the Conservative Party MPs vote against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, basically voting against support for Ukraine. Could the Minister clarify what is this government's position on support for Ukraine?
Excellent question. And a very brief answer from the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition described our measures to build new homes for Canadians as disgusting. I'll tell you what I will describe as disgusting. The failure by the official opposition to support the country which is fighting the world's fight right now for democracy, for the rules.
That's a whole other topic. I think that we've gotten the most of the juice from this squeeze on watching this video. Let's take a look at the actual budget here. I'm going to give you a quick little summary of what just went down, some of the key points, and then we're going to take a closer look at the actual policies inside of the budget here. A lot of things in here when you look at the table of contents that we're going to get into. A lot of things that were hinted at in that speech, but we're going to get into more depth on them. Here's my my little summary from some of the notes I took. Freeland comes in saying we've got the strongest economy in the G7 next year. Everyone says, "Wow, this is fantastic." Very, very good at sort of picking the things, the data points that make us look good. There are also in that same report that I've checked out some other stats that are a little more damning, but that's fine. Everyone wants to sort of make themselves look as good as possible when they're speaking in front of Canada. And she says, though, even though though we have all these good numbers, all these numbers are looking good, Canadians are feeling the squeeze and we need to address their pain. She says, we have a responsible fiscal plan and we've reduced our deficit faster than any other country in the G7, referring, of course, to the deficit, like the yearly deficit, the amount of tax revenue that we get versus the amount we need to spend on social programs. She says, well, that's kind of shrunk faster than most G7 countries. Of course, leaving out from that equation why our GDP has gone up more than other countries. It's the extremely high percent of growth in Canada's population driving a lot of this GDP rather than productivity, something we've talked about a lot on the channel. She says we've got two objectives. We want to continue to support the middle class while mortgage renewals are looming. This is one thing I really want to check out in the document here in a moment. So we're going to make some big generational changes to all sorts of things, competition laws, as well as this mortgage charter, which we'll get into in a second. She says we're cracking down on junk fees that Canadians are saddled with, and we're investigating international roaming fees to get rid of it. And she says for Canadians who are struggling with these higher interest rates, we've got that Canadian mortgage charter. I'm really looking forward to looking at what is included in that, which will require banks to give tailored relief to mortgage holders who are in distress in the years to come, which might happen for a lot of people, the 1.1 billion people who have their mortgages set to renew over the next couple of years at far higher rates than where they originally locked in their mortgages. She says, hey, if you worked hard and found a good job in the past, you were set. You could afford a home, save a little bit for retirement, and have a couple kids and have a good life. She says now that's not the case, possibly borrowing from Pierre Poilievre's speech earlier this year, but also like this is something that's maybe a little bit pretty clear in Canada, that the promise for most Canadians that if you do the right things in the right order and you work hard, everything's going to be okay. That clearly has changed. So whether she got it from Poilievre or from just the sentiment out there, this is what she's saying. She also announces new measures to build thousands of homes, throwing more money at the problem of housing. I have questions on, is this actually going to result in more housing starts? A lot of the money that's been thrown via the Housing Accelerator Fund and things in the past hasn't really panned out to the extent that we'd hope it would. So it'll be interesting to watch that. She says there's going to be $20 billion, I think it was, in new financing options for construction of new homes and new rental properties. Guaranteed low interest rate loans for builders so they can have cost certainty and be profitable to drive more housing growth. She also says we're going to help move people across provincial borders to help build. We're going to crack down on Airbnb and other short-term rentals. And hey, we're helping so many Canadians get into homes with the tax-free first home savings account, which launched this past year. I don't really buy how much that helps. Of course, it helps people sort of save up a little bit of money, invest it tax-free, much like a TFSA. But when it comes to the housing crisis problem, maybe is it more help than it is, or is it more harm than it is help? I wonder, given that as you allow people to have larger down payments, save up more, that just adds more demand into that sort of entry home market. So maybe prices stay a little bit higher there. Any kind of things that help people buy homes, of course, is helpful for those people, but that help could run out as that help causes prices to go up. Do you get what I'm saying here? We continue. Lots of focus on building homes quickly throughout this entire thing. She says every day should represent a new opportunity for Canadians, and we are fighting the conservative cynicism with hope and hard work and positive thoughts about the future. Now, we get to some of the response from some of the other politicians, which we went over. Poilievre saying the $20 billion in new spending, a lot of it coming from debt servicing, the increased interest rates, and the cost of paying that interest has gone up largely. This is a lot of that. He says that's going to cause everything to get worse. We're going to result in more inflation. Government spending is inflationary, and this is just going to make everything worse. It was what Poilievre is saying. And the Bloc says that, hey, we asked for some support for seniors, maybe some support for people who are struggling. The NDP is sort of echoing similar sentiments, and they're left with their sort of hands up saying, well, why didn't we get the things we were asking for? Especially the NDP, who have a supply and confidence agreement, who you would think the Liberal government would want to appease, but maybe the Liberals are making a sort of calculation here. We don't need to give the NDP everything they want because they're just bluffing. They're chicken. They're not going to actually vote no confidence and push us into an election. So those are some of the key points. Let's get into the details. By the way, if you are in the chat, you can ask any questions that you want and just tag me at Russell Matthews in the comment, and then it'll sort of highlight on my side, so I'll be more likely to see it and respond to it as we go through these details. First, I want to show you this table of contents. This is, of course, the fall economic statement that we just got access to. And we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty on some of the most important things. And I'm going to open up my my little annotation software so I can draw on the screen. And let's first take a look at what are some of the interesting things that we want to look at here. All right. Just scroll. I'm just scanning here to sort of see what we've got going on. Okay, so what is the fiscal anchor? That'll be interesting. Traditionally, that's been the debt to GDP over the past couple of years, saying as long as we have a declining debt to GDP, declining amount of debt as a country relative to our gross domestic product, as long as that number, the GDP keeps going up, and our debt relative to that GDP keeps going up, or going down, then we're fiscally anchored, we're fine. That's what they've been saying in the past. Let's look at that. Let's also look at, okay, accelerating a lot of this is sort of re-announcing things that they've already announced, more financing. It'd be interesting to see if they have an interest rate listed there in the $20 billion in low-cost rental financing, speeding up approvals. All right. Where's the short-term rental stuff? I don't see that in here yet. Maybe it is, though. I want to check that out. Okay, here it is, cracking down on non-compliant short-term rentals. This is the interesting sort of little tidbit here, right? People are saying, oh, is the government banning short-term rentals? Is that what they're doing? No. That what they're doing is not allowing short-term rental owners to write off the expenses of operating their short-term rentals, which you might say, okay, well, that might do some work, but it's not all short-term rentals. It's only short-term rentals in areas where their municipality has already banned Airbnb. So it's only punishing people who are running illegal Airbnbs in jurisdictions where those aren't allowed. That's the only thing this is going to impact. We might take a look at that. Right to repair, making groceries more affordable. The rural top-up, that's we already heard that earlier this month. I see a question here from Dashcam UBI coming. I doubt it. I honestly doubt it right now because that would largely, it would probably have a lot of spending attached to it, even if it meant dismantling some of the other social security sort of systems we have. I think that's going to be a hard sell in this interest rate environment. Just like any other human, the government has to pay interest on the debt that it takes on, right? So it makes it harder to sort of sell these sort of big spending items. Also see Timber Yeti saying, is there any guarantee that all these new homes will be affordable, or will this simply ensure that the rich will have more houses to buy in and turn around and rent back to us? That's a good question. I know that there's a lot of rental construction, like purpose-built rental stuff, to help with the rental situation. But I'm unsure of just how much of this is going to sort of starter home, affordable homes. Although at the same time, as a lot of people will make the argument that as you build more homes, regardless of the price range, that it reduces demand in all areas, right? Because there's sort of more homes in general. I don't know if that's actually the case. Maybe you're right that it's just a situation where it allows people with the liquid capital to actually go out there and buy things. Xavier says GDP is expected around 1.7 to 1.8 compared to around 1% to 1.5 in the last 5 years. We'll have to take a look at some of those projections because that would definitely be an increasing debt to GDP. Okay, let's keep going here and I'll get to some more questions in a moment. Okay, building Canada's clean economy, all of the green investments that we've talked about. Responsible government spending, responsible investments to meet the current needs of Canadians. I wonder if saying something's responsible makes it so. That's interesting. Okay, and then we've got the debt management strategy. I want to check that out. Okay, so let's start. Let's see. Let's start with the fiscal anchor. Oh, look at that. It's our favorite phrase. AAA credit rating. We're so happy about that. A strong federal balance sheet has allowed the government to take necessary action in the face of economic shocks, such as the pandemic and the financial crisis, and that's giving us the ability to respond to future challenges. So being fiscally responsible, not spending a ton today, is going to give the government more ability to turn back on those taps when there's another crisis. Okay. In the fall economic statement, we have the debt to GDP. Yeah, this is now still their anchor. Declining from 2024 to 25 onwards, reaching 39.1% in 2028. You know what I would really love to freaking see as a fiscal anchor is debt to GDP, yes, per person, right? This stops us from being able to do this human QE that results in a lower quality of life for average Canadians, right? GDP per capita is the largest or the most reliable indicator, or the best one that we have at the very least, of a individuals in that country's prosperity and quality of life, GDP per person. Now, when we're looking at this fiscal anchor, debt to GDP, well, that's okay. Like, it's of course good if you have less debt relative to your gross domestic product, your economic output as a country. But when you don't consider the GDP per capita, I think you get skewed numbers, right? Because if we're looking at our debt to GDP per person, my guess is that instead of looking like a chart like that, it would be like that. We're some of the lowest growth in debt to GDP per capita until 2028 based on OECD projections. So that's going to be interesting to look at. All right. I want to go back up here because this helps me. I can just click on the table of contents and it'll take me right to that section. Okay. We said we wanted to look at, and if I'm missing anything that you want to check out here, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to it. Yeah, we already know from the report yesterday what the short-term rental stuff is going to be. And we already talked about that, so we can skip over it. Let's see if there's any interest rates attached to this. Unlocking $20 billion in low-cost rental financing. The apartments that renters need are not getting built fast enough. Okay, so this is $20 billion in only rental construction, right? Building purpose-built rentals, probably. Something I think should happen, right? We don't see as much as we did with buildings that were built in the 70s that you may see around your neighborhoods, these sort of large-scale rental units. I think that's a good thing to build, hopefully helping with the rental shortage, but I think ultimately people want to live in homes that they own, detached homes for the most part, especially if you're not in a major urban center. Okay, so the CMHC is going to give low-cost financing for builders to build new rental. What is low cost? It looks like they don't say. $20 billion per year. Increasing it by that much. And they all have to have at least 5 rental units, at least 5-plex or more. It can be for student housing as well, though. It will unlock the low-cost financing needed to build more and 30 more rental apartments built per year. Interesting promises being made there. Rhea Kamenzuli says, please check out the digitization. Let me see if I can find that. Digitization. Is that in the table of contents? Let me check. Okay, that's interesting. Oh yes, we want to look at the new Canadian mortgage charter. I've never heard of this. Let's check it out. Chart 21 in fiscal anchors is interesting, says Xavier. Okay, cool. I'm gonna try to bookmark that in the back of my mind. New Canadian mortgage charter. Okay, actually, maybe this is better over here. Let me know where you want the chat. Maybe down here for now. And then I'll scroll up as we go. Canadians work hard to be able to afford a home, but because of interest rates, a lot of people are worried about mortgage payments. Right, because people have put savings and earnings into their home, they should be protected when interest rates rise faster than fastest rise in a generation. Okay, so we're taking action. Announces the new Canadian Mortgage Charter builds on the existing guidance. Okay, maybe this is just a repackaging of the stuff they've already said. Let's check it out. Mortgage holders in financial difficulty on their principal residence can expect to receive fair, reasonable, and timely mortgage relief measures from their federally regulated financial institutions, their FRFIs. So this is only mortgages from the big banks, like the BMOs, the CIBCs, the Scotiabank, the TDs. Those are the federally regulated financial institutions. Which are expected to proactively reach out to vulnerable borrowers and make full use of available tools. So they're not going to tell us, oh, there are measures down here. I was about to say, are you seriously just going to blue ball us like that and just say, hey, well, we'll tell the banks and then you'll find out. All right, the Canadian Mortgage Charter. Allowing temporary extensions of the amortization period for mortgage holders at risk. Wait, so is this on... This is on new mortgages, right? So they're allowing amortization extensions for mortgage holders at risk. I think that this is a little bit of a slippery slope, right? One that would keep house prices going up and up and up over the long term. Is if we, every time there's a challenge to pay the mortgage, allow people to stretch out their payments to longer periods of time. Right? Like you have to go into debt for 2 generations ahead of you to be able to make a payment that's reasonable to own a home, right? It feels like still propping things up. Waiving fees and costs that would have otherwise been charged for relief measures. Oh, that's a good thing. If banks were going to be predatory and say like, hey, we're your only option, so we're going to screw you, hopefully that stays out of here. Not requiring insured mortgages holders to requalify under the insured minimum qualifying rate when switching lenders at mortgage renewal. That's interesting. I saw on Twitter one mortgage person that I follow saying that this was already a rule or was already allowed, but that people, even the banks, just didn't really know it was allowed. This is a big deal, right? Because if you're not familiar, the mortgage stress test applies to many mortgages. And in order to get a mortgage, you have to see what is the rate I'm going to get, and then what are the payments I'm going to have to make at that rate. But also, I'm going to have to qualify for 2% higher than that mortgage rate, just to make sure there's a little wiggle room in case rates go up farther. That's the idea. Now they're saying so that you're not locked into your lender, they're going to not make you have to go through that. I think that could be it's good and bad, right? Because it stops people from feeling like they have to stay with the same lender, because if you stay with the same lender, you can sort of extend your mortgage more easily. You don't have to go through that stress test traditionally. Now you're not going to have to go through that stress test even if you move around your mortgage. Okay, contacting homeowners. Okay, so let them know what their renewal options are ahead of time. Homeowners at risk have the ability to make lump sum payments to avoid negative amortization. Negative amortization, for those who know, largely applies to fixed payment variable rate mortgages, where there's this mortgage product where you can pay the same amount on a variable rate mortgage every single month, even if interest rates go up. But the thing that changes is the amount that you're paying towards the interest and the amount that you're paying towards equity in the property, the amount you're paying down the loan. Negative amortization happens when, interest rates go up so much that you're actually paying entirely interest, or not even covering the interest, in the amount that you owe as you make mortgage payments goes up. Like you're paying up your house instead of paying down your house. That's a rough situation to be in. But they're saying they're going to allow people to make lump sum payments to avoid this, and give them the opportunity to sell their house without any prepayment penalties. I mean, I like the idea of allowing people to make lump sum payments. A lot of mortgages have policies that say you got to pay a fee if you want to break this mortgage, or if you want to make a lump sum payment to bring down your monthly payment by making a big chunk payment. And as well as breaking mortgages or selling your principal residence without any prepayment penalties. That's, I think, a good thing. You should be able to sell your house without having to worry about breaking your mortgage. Not charging interest on interest in the event that the mortgage relief measures result in a temporary period of negative amortization. Interesting. So making it so that if you are in a negative amortization situation, the interest that gets added to your balance doesn't accrue interest and doesn't contribute. So you'd still be paying, like, I guess the maximum amount. Yeah, like whatever amount that you're paying when you hit that trigger rate, when you hit the point where you're only paying interest, that's what you'd continue to pay, I guess, and the new balance that grows on your property wouldn't be used in the calculation for your monthly interest rate payments, or rather, like, increasing the snowball effect of how quickly the balance on your mortgage goes up. Okay. Interesting. Malcolm and Galen. Okay. All right, well, we already know about the tax-free first home savings account. We've talked about that. That's interesting. Interesting stuff. Again, the question comes up about helping people who are struggling with renewing their mortgages, right? Like, I absolutely feel for the people that have gotten into a bad situation, maybe felt FOMO at market peak, like I need to get in now, otherwise my family's not going to have a place to live because I can barely afford to pay for it now. What if it goes up further, right? You can understand getting into that frame of mind. And then having to deal with these interest rates. I totally feel for people in that situation. I have friends in that sort of situation. At the same time, I worry about this sort of like, let us help you homeowners, make sure that you don't feel as much stress around owning your home. It, one, diminishes the impact of the monetary policy of the Bank of Canada, right? Because they raise interest rates specifically for this, to make homeowners, at least first, and then the rest of the economy, feel more poor because their debt costs more, right? So you stop spending as much, you tighten the belt strap, and the idea is that reduces demand. Reduces demand in the economy, and as a result reduces the chief thing that the Bank of Canada is fighting against, inflation, right? This numbs that effect, right? If you know that you're going to be backstopped on your mortgage to a certain extent, then like the Bank of Canada's stuff doesn't have as large an effect. The other thing is just, what is the precedent that it sets to constantly bail out homeowners? Like, I think the government's made very clear who they prioritize in times of stress, right? It's homeowners. Like, look at what happened in the pandemic. The first sign of, like, people, we got to stay home, we got to shut down the economy. Well, what was one of those first measures that Trudeau announced from the front of his cottage in all of those press conferences that were going on at the time? It was mortgage deferrals. Stop paying your mortgage, we'll tack it on to the end of your mortgage. You can sort of pause for now. Lots of people did this. Lots of landlords did this as well. And sort of got all of that cash flow, that beefed up cash flow, because they didn't have to make their mortgage payments for that amount of time. But my point being, who is it that the Canadian government helps in times of stress? It's homeowners. Just from what we've seen. Okay, enough ranting about that. That was interesting, though. I'm glad we checked that out, the new charter for mortgage holders. Mortgage renewal. Let's get into this. Oh, yes, thank you, Javier. I hope I'm saying your name right. Yeah, let's check it out. Chart 21 in Fiscal Anchor. Let me just search Chart 21. Let's get it. Thanks for bringing the juicy stuff to me. I appreciate the help in finding this stuff. Okay, Chart 21, public debt charges as a percent of GDP. Okay. So we're projecting that public debt charges will go up over the coming years. We sort of have seen them go up since the pandemic, right? Taking on a lot more debt during the pandemic to cover a lot of the social programs that helped a lot of people. Oh, I'm covering this up, aren't I? Let me zoom in here and redraw it. Yeah, that works a little bit better. Yeah, so we see this the federal debt go up here. The debt servicing costs, right, as a percentage of GDP. Public debt charges, yeah. Yeah, so projecting it to go up and then to sort of, I guess, just stay the same over the next number of years. Interesting. What were some of your takeaways here that were making it interesting? I guess just like seeing the public debt charges go up is pretty wild. With softer growth expected in the near term, the government's taking action to continue delivering its fiscal anchor as outlined in Chapter 4. Going to make sure the deficit is at or below the 2023 projection, lower the debt to GDP ratio, and have a declining deficit to GDP ratio. So you can see how politicians are really incentivized. Just make this number go up, no matter what. That's your fiscal anchor. Just make the GDP go up. And it's the solution to all of your problems because you'll have good headlines to say in the House of Commons, right? Without sort of thinking about like what is the actual human impact of this sort of stuff. Wow. Okay. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. I want to take a minute here and take some questions here as we sort of get closer to wrapping up this stream. What did you think of all that? What did you think of what Freeland was saying? Like, do you like it? Are you not a fan? What do you think we should do instead? Right? Like I've given some of my opinions. I'm curious what you're thinking. What about digitalization? Oh, did I? Maybe I just searched for it wrong. Oh yeah, okay, it's there. Let's take a look as we get some questions in. Digitalization. Okay, tax system, international tax reform and digitalization. We've got to have a robust tax system to have a social safety net. So Canadian businesses can pay their fair share. To implement the Pillar 2 global minimum tax in Canada. All right, we've got multilateral treaties to implement this with other countries. The federal government agreed to pause the implementation of Canada's digital services tax until the end of 2023 so that we can get more countries into it. Okay. Reaffirms the desire to implement the Pillar 1 system. We want a digital service tax. So I think that this is like the Netflix thing, right? This is talking about we need to pay, or we need to make sure that these big multinational corporations who are offering digital goods are paying a fair corporate tax rate in Canada, even if they're not taxed in the Canadian jurisdiction. That's the idea here. But I'm a little bit skeptical of how well that sort of thing will work. I think as you add more taxes for corporations, especially as a small country like Canada, you have the risk of them just saying, complying with your policies just isn't worth it for us. We saw that with Facebook removing news from their platform, all of these sort of issues. We saw that in a lot of the fight that YouTube and Google, like Google owns YouTube, put up against the changes to the different sort of content laws and what amount of Canadian content should be shown and highlighted. Stuff that's not implemented yet at all, really. But that is questionable on how it would actually be implemented. Tara says, we should elect you for finance minister. Honestly, I don't think that I could sit in the House of Commons without, I don't think I could do it. So like I watch most of these speeches on 3x speed to get through all of the things. Like there's a lot of nonsense. And I think that I might even be able to do more good making content and talking about things than actually being there and actually having to deal with the day-to-day of it, you know? Hey Russell, appreciate you covering this. I'm joining late. Can you touch on the most important information covered today? Yeah, I did a summary a little bit earlier. You can either scroll back to that or I'll give like a little brief one here. A lot of stuff saying we're going to provide a lot more low interest rate financing for people who are building rental housing. We are going to, it was a lot on housing and making life affordable for Canadians, but a lot of it through the sort of housing angle. Mortgage charter, I think, was one of the most interesting ones, where they're saying, hey, a lot of people, 1.1 million people, are going to have to renew their mortgages at higher rates, and that could cause systemic risk. So they said, hey, here's a set of rules that banks need to follow to allow you to have certain relief options. Interesting, potentially controversial, but interesting. All right. Yeah, Alan, maybe that's the summary, and can certainly feel like that sometimes. I don't think that we really are, though. Yeah, Brian says, I'm too logical for that gig. Yeah, I think perhaps that's the case. We got a question here from Javier. Again, I'm butchering your name every time. I feel like Xavier, probably, I believe. Sorry about that, buddy. Do you take inspiration from other YouTubes for your coverage? Yeah, I do, but not directly in terms of like the sort of content area that I'm in, covering politics directly and sort of economic policy. I really like. I watch a lot of. Well, actually, the original inspiration was during the pandemic, watching a lot of Meet Kevin and sort of his economic coverage. Less so these days. Don't take as much inspiration from there, but getting me started there. But one person that I really like is Peter Santorello, I think is his name. He does these sort of video logs where he goes all over the world and sort of just lets people talk and walks around their different towns, gives you a different sense of lets them tell their story from their angle, right? Now, what I take from that is probably thinking that like all of this controversy, all of the things, like there's people on both sides of them, and they're not idiots, right? Like I think that a lot of conservatives think that all liberals are idiots, and a lot of liberals think that all conservatives are idiots. And I think that thinking in such sort of in such defined ways isn't really wise, right? Like everybody has a brain. Everybody makes their own decisions based on the content that they consume. I think that, yeah, maybe I'm not making my point entirely well here, but there's a reason people think the things that they do, and if you don't agree with them, maybe it's because you have consumed different content than them. Maybe you're coming from a different sort of point of life. So I guess I'm trying to say that I like to go through this stuff and present it as unbiased as I can. I know I've gotten a little bit more opinionated as the years have gone on here. But yeah, I think there's a good answer for you, hopefully. Yeah, Andrew Cameron says, Russell, tell us you accumulate Bitcoin. I have a little bit, yeah, and also a little bit of Ethereum. I think that being young, as a long-term investment, those things can possibly have some upside for me. I think it is volatile. If you can stomach that volatility, it's not a bad thing to be into. And also, it's a little bit of a hedge on like, okay, our financial system, there are some issues I have with it. A large centralization of control over the monetary policy by central bankers and the select few who are central bankers across the world, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, Bank of England. A lot of this, I think, controls a lot of what goes on in the world. And the fact that it's a few white dudes in a boardroom that make these overarching policies, these big changes that have worldwide implications, I think is pretty frustrating. And when we now have the technology to maybe have a little bit more of programmatic values, or at least rules that we know will always be followed, with sort of code is law argument, that's what I find interesting about it. I'm in Manitoba. How are food prices across Canada? Yeah, they're definitely high. Definitely high. What's your take on heavy cryptocurrency tax, 50% on profits tax? I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to there, like as a way for the government to make more money on it, or like are you just talking about capital gains? Like a lot of the time you can't hold cryptocurrency in tax registered accounts like a TFSA or an RRSP, so that can mean that you're having to pay capital gains tax. Half of the growth is taxed at your marginal income tax rate. Alan says, what's wrong with white dudes? Nothing's wrong with white dudes, but I just don't think that it should only be a select group. It wouldn't matter if they're dudes, if they're women, if they're black, if they're white, if they're anything. If it's a small group of people, all who are very similar, I don't think that that's the group of people that should definitely be making the decisions on behalf of the entire world. Yeah, nice meet. Kevin is great for information breakdown. If you need help for pertinent information, I'm available to help if needed. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Themis says, what do you think of dropping corporate tax rate to outcompete Ireland to attract huge IT companies? I think maybe that's more of the direction, instead of the big subsidies, corporate welfare subsidies to green businesses only, that maybe being more competitive to organizations that employ many Canadians specifically, and giving them a very low corporate tax rate could incentivize companies to come to Canada. I think ultimately we need to do as much as we can to increase the amount of innovation going on in the country, innovation in new tools, new software, things that can help Canadians produce more with less, increasing the productivity, right? That's what I think. Okay. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. I haven't done a live stream in a hot minute. I hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe it's something that I'll do a little bit more regularly. I was doing for a while live streams and then sort of editing it down and making that my videos. So I'd have the live stream and then sort of chopped up videos. I've seen a lot of YouTubers doing that. Just hard to. I've been working full-time job as well. Like for the past. Like about 2 years ago, I started learning how to code, and I've gotten really into software development. So I've been doing that as well as keeping doing YouTube and talking to all of you and continuing a little bit of work in the real estate industry. But so that has taken up a lot of time, and it's resulted in a little bit of a slower cadence here. But I appreciate you all being here. And there's a lot of names in here I recognize from a year ago, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago to when I really started making a lot of YouTube videos. So I appreciate you sticking with me and seeing people in the chat: Robert, Armin, Daniel, Dr. Salty, Andrew, Jody, Neocrosis, Air, JD, Egolist, Aaron. Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much. And I always say this on the live streams, but this is when I actually get a chance to, I feel like, get to know you a little bit more, and maybe you get to know me as like a little bit more of an unfiltered sort of my take on things, maybe a little bit less refined, a little less scripted or thought out than my videos. But I think that's helpful every once in a while, and I certainly get a better idea of what you're all like, and you're the best. Love having you here, and hope you join me for my next live. If you hit the notification bell, you'll know when I post new videos. You can choose to watch them or choose to not, based on what they're on and if it interests you. But it does help you to know when I'm going live, because sometimes I go live without a lot of warning. And thank you very much, Daniel Boy, for the $5 super chat. That I appreciate that. Maybe I'll have a beer on you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Do you think that there's going to be pullback in stocks and crypto? I think that a lot, especially sort of higher risk stocks, maybe tech stocks and crypto, which largely follows what sort of higher risk assets do. I think that it all really depends on the macroeconomic situation. As simplistic as it sounds, I think a lot of the results of investments, at least when you look at them en masse, in bulk, is the result of the interest rate environment, right? If the Federal Reserve decides we're done hiking, we're actually going to start cutting, I think we're going to see stocks and crypto rip. Especially if we, like, nothing's for certain, right? But especially if we see some sort of situation where we need to turn the liquidity taps back on, some sort of large recession, large social thing happens, or a black swan like COVID was. I think that's where stocks and crypto rip, especially if there's more QE, a little bit more quantitative easing, more money added to the system. As you increase the denominator, the numerator stays the same for cash, right? but largely that increase in money supply will also apply to a lot of assets. So as simplistic as it sounds, I think that we're going to have to watch the Bank of Canada, yes, but they also take their cues from the Federal Reserve in the States. I think that we're going to have to focus on that. Okay, and with that, we're going to call it. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the support. Hopefully this video helped you out at least a little bit. Stay tuned for more content on the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one, everyone. I'm gonna go have a beer, and I hope that you do too. I'll catch you later.